This guy's cooking can make anyone get buffs and can even make them permanently stronger. Not only that, the dog could also talk after repeatedly eating his food. He might be overpowered, but he remains humble, hiding his power as an F rank. Before I spoil too much of the fun, let's start the story. Everything was destroyed, and only the countless bodies of monsters were left on the ground. And the cause of it all is a man with half of his face covered by a black reptilian mask while holding a crystal. Behind him is a boy, together with a growling dog, questioning his identity and whether he was the cause of the monster disaster. 3 days before the monster disaster, a giant bear came up behind the boy, who blasted it with fire magic. Once the bear fell, he sighed, clicking his tongue. It stole his prey. He is Yuris, an F-rank hunter. He crouched down to observe the D-rank mountain bear. As an F-rank, he wouldn't get a bounty even if he brought back the parts. As for the goblins, more than half of their heads have been crushed, so there's no way that he's getting anything usable. He pulled out a knife. He'll at least grab the ones that are intact and was able to fill up a bag. Then he used fire magic to burn the corpses and earth magic to bury them. After swallowing the corpses, the ground turned back to normal. The cleanup's complete, just like the guild's protocol. He sat on a nearby rock and sighed of how much of a hassle it was. If it was a dungeon, it would absorb everything on its own. He pulled his glove to look at his watch. There was only 1 hour until the city gates closed, but his stomach was growling. Should he just eat later? No, he can still make it. He opened his magic bag and pulled out a table, a stove, and a pot. Dang, he has a whole kitchen in there. Anyway, it was time for a meal. He rummaged inside his bag again for the ingredients, but he couldn't find it, and decided to personally look inside. He really needed to organize his magic bag soon. Finally, he pulled his head out, holding 2 bags containing the ingredients. Soon he began cooking. It was a hearty soup with vegetables and meat. Once the food was ready, he started digging in. It was delicious. He swore that his cooking keeps getting better. At this rate, if he quits being a hunter, he could run a restaurant, right? He answered himself, saying there was no way. His laugh began to die down, thinking about how weird he must have looked like. He definitely isn't lonely. After finishing his meal, he looked around as if waiting for someone. It should be about time. And as if on cue, a dog came out of the bushes before him. Yuris had been waiting for him, holding a plate in his hand. The dog excitedly ran up to him, so he had to raise the plate before placing it down after the dog calmed down. The dog happily ate with his tail wagging, and Yuris touched the claw marks on the dog's back. It looks like his wounds have healed completely, though his fur is still patchy. But since it doesn't bother him, Yuris thought it was fine. It's been nearly a month since he met this dog. It happened after a monster hunt. He appeared from the shadows, badly injured, so he healed him right away and fed him. Ever since then, he somehow shows up the moment Yuris starts preparing food. He's completely hooked on his cooking now. He noticed the bandage around him and wondered whether someone redid it for him. It suits him very well. He checked the time and realized it was getting late, so he did purification magic on the tools he used and packed them back inside his magic bag. He had to head back now and told the dog to just leave the dish there. He looked at Yuris confusedly, so Yuris petted him, explaining that meant he'll come back to see him again. He began walking away before looking back at the dog, who barked at him. Something felt off. At this time, running normally wouldn't get him there in time, should he use it. The ends of his hair changed colors as he used acceleration magic. It should be fine since no one should be able to see him at this hour, so he dashed off and ran at a quick pace. For some reason, this magic forces a certain movement, making him move like this, and even creating that weird sound. He really had no idea why it happened. In Ryanel town, one of the guards told Julius that they were closing the gates soon, so he asked him to wait just a little longer as Yuris hasn't made it back yet. The annoyed guard told him that since he's Yuris's friend, he should tell him to get back before sundown. At that moment, Julius noticed Yuris running towards the gate and informed the guard that he's back. Yuris apologized for getting delayed, and Julius just told him not to worry about it and to come inside. He is Julius, a guard, and Yuris's friend. Once they were inside, the guard sneered at how pathetic Yuris was, thinking he struggled against goblins again. Julius put his arm around Yuris and laughed, explaining that the other guard was just on edge after fighting with his wife. The guard angrily exclaimed that he could hear him, but Julius just ignored him and asked about Yuris's hunt today. It honestly wasn't great since he got interrupted. Julius just laughed, patting his back. It seems he ran into a high-rank monster, but either way, it was a good thing that he made it back in one piece. Yuris had to go and report to the guild now, so he asked him to stop by Ferris's shop and then call it a night. Julius sighed. He's got the night shift now, but he'll visit Ferris once his break starts too, so he better wait for him. Yuris just waved his hand to bid goodbye, and did not answer anymore. After arriving at the guild, the other hunters made fun of Yuris, calling him the Goblin Slayer since he only hunts goblins. At this rate, he'll wipe them all out solo. Yuris didn't mind them much, and just replied that there was no way in hell that was happening. He went over to the counter, and Shirley, the guild receptionist, greeted him. He handed her the bag so she could confirm the 13 goblins he hunted. He slumped on the counter, informing her that the number of monsters was increasing lately. Meanwhile, goblins are decreasing. That explains why his kill count is lower than usual. She grabbed a book contrasting reports from other hunters and flipped through it, confirming that there have been more sightings of D-rank monsters lately. This time, a mountain bear wiped out a bunch of goblins, which means Yuris's earning took a hit. Then, he tried his luck and asked whether he could get a reward if he brought back parts from a D-rank monster. Shirley immediately denied, saying that wasn't possible. Well, he figured that was the case, since it was the rules. With a worried expression, Shirley asked if he had considered ranking up. Eurus thought about it. E rank and above required being in a party, right? But he's terrible at forming parties, she should know that. Though she thought it was a waste since he could easily handle C rank hunts with his skills. But socializing isn't really his thing. Just then, a muscular man approached him, asking if he was still stuck hunting weaklings. It was Bagan, the leader of Azure Dragon's Scale. An elf woman was holding onto his left hand, and on his right were two men, a younger black-haired one and an older bearded man that was cladded in armor. The black-haired guy pointed to Eurus, questioning how long he was planning to leech off the guild. The elf woman laughed, thinking he was being shameless after causing endless troubles for Bagan. Does she mean when he teamed up with them? That only happened because they ignored what he said. He told them to be cautious. The black-haired guy cut him off, claiming that was completely unexpected, and when they retreated, he just stood there like an idiot. If Bagan hadn't been there, he'd be dead by now. Eurus looked up at Bagan, who was looking away. Smells fishy. Either way, Eurus refuses to join a party. He doesn't want people like them holding him back. The black-haired guy angrily exclaimed that a weakling like him, who only hunts fodder, shouldn't be running his mouth. If he doesn't join a party, he'll stay in F rank forever. Is he fine with that? Eurus looked away. If it meant avoiding unnecessary hassle, then yeah, he's fine with it. Bagan was about to get angry when an old man shouted to keep it down and asked what was going on. It was Glingal, the guildmaster. He glared at Eurus. It was him again. Eurus just shrugged, claiming that Bagan and his party started it. Glingal angrily hit the stairs railings and warned him not to talk back. The first floor was soon enveloped with silence, and only Glingal's voice could be heard. He told Bagan that he's late, and that everyone was already gathered. Bagan apologized and told his party to wait there. Glingal began walking away, informing Eurus that he's coming as well. Shirley seemed to know what they were talking about as she immediately protested. He said he'd put this decision on hold. However, he changed his mind and decided not to wait any longer. She had more to say, but Glingal cut her off and threatened her to stay silent and do her job. Eurus asked Bagan what was going on, but he just told him to hurry up and come. They entered a room and inside was the guildmaster, Glingal, sitting at the head of the table, with the other hunters surrounding him. With the overwhelming support of their guild's A-rank hunters, and under his authority as guildmaster, Glingal announced that Eurus is now permanently banished from their town, making him exclaim in confusion. Meanwhile, in the forest, the man with half of his face covered by a black reptilian mask stood inside the dungeon. Inside, various monsters emerged from the black liquid on the ground and walls. Soon, he had an army of monsters that he commanded to go forth and destroy everything. Back at the meeting, Eurus confusedly asked where this banishment came from. Geofford, guild leader of the Bright Hope Party, claimed that all he's good at is goblin hunting, and they didn't need that kind of hunter there anymore. Sir Wilhelm, leader of the Knights of the Dawn, heard that he's so obsessed with hunting weaklings that it's been messing up the new recruit training. Glingal asked how long it's been since he became a hunter, and Eurus answered that it's been about a year. Most people rank up within 3 months and join a party, but Eurus was still aimlessly killing goblins day in and day out. The result of that, he asked Rika to say it. Rika, leader of Rika's Survey Corps, read the report. Over the past few months, goblins have dropped to about 20% of what they were last year. Glingal sighed. That makes it nearly impossible to train rookies, which is why, using their collective authority, they've decided to banish him. Ankh, leader of Shin Phantom, claimed that he went too far, that's all. Not that he cared either way. Aiko, leader of the Shadow Corps, was absent, while Bagan, leader of the Azure Dragon Scale, stayed silent. Eurus tried to explain that goblins are the type that pop back up to for everyone that is killed, so there's no way that just him hunting them would decrease their numbers like that. However, Glingal cut him off, claiming that their numbers were clearly going down despite what he's saying. Lately, Eurus felt like there's been more D-rank monsters showing up, and asked Rika if she didn't think that was related. Rika turned away, stuttering as she hadn't made a report about that. Geofford pointed out that he's now just trying to shift the blame. How shameless of him. There was no data backing up his claims, therefore all of this was his fault. Their logic ain't logicking. Glingal gave him a 3 days notice to pack his things and get out of the city. Eurus was left inside the room while the guildmaster and the leaders left him alone. Maybe he really wasn't cut out for this. Outside, Shirley anxiously waited, and Bagan, who passed by her, apologized, confusing her. He just asked her to let Eurus know for him. Shirley questioned what he was talking about. If he had something to say, he should say it to Eurus himself, but Bagan did not respond and just continued walking away. Eurus walked out of the room and saw Shirley, so he asked what was wrong. She claimed that it was nothing, and Eurus scratched the back of his head, informing her that he's being banished. Shirley apologized. She kept asking them to reconsider again and again, but they wouldn't listen. He assured her that she didn't need to worry about it since he's the one who broke the rules, so it's on him. Eurus thanked her for sticking up for him and waved goodbye to go swing by Ferris's place because she'll close the shop if he doesn't hurry. Upon entering the shop, Ferris, the waitress and poster girl of Diner Ferris, greeted him. Eurus sat on a table and apologized for being late. Ferris walked over to his table, saying there was no need to be polite, and served him his salad. Then, she placed a basket containing 2 jars of mayonnaise sauce from Naze's general store on the table. Eurus had been waiting for this. He opened the jar and poured some on his salad. He took a bite and was immediately brought to heaven. It was that good. It had a rich flavor, just the right tang, and a creamy finish. Naze's mayo sauce really was the best. Ferris noticed that he seemed to really love that sauce and pointed out that their city also sells mayo, but they weren't the same. The one from Naze's store in the capital hits different. Normal mayo uses whole eggs, but theirs? They only use egg yolks, and that's what makes it so rich and flavorful. Seeing him so happy, Ferris suggested ordering more for him next time, but he declined as there would no longer be a next time. Ferris was surprised to hear about him getting banished from the city and questioned what the hell was going on. They said it was because Eurus went overboard hunting goblins on his own that it became a burden on everyone else. Ferris countered that goblins multiply like cockroaches. He kills one, two more shows up. So there was no way that their numbers were dropping that fast. This pisses her off. She raised her sleeves and marched towards the door, planning to protest to Glingle. Eurus quickly clutched onto the hem of her dress and stopped her from doing so. He assured her that it was fine since he was the one who never ranked up, even after all this time. Ferris knew that he wasn't good at working in parties, but she believed that the guild's not so desperate that they couldn't support people like him. She sat down with her arms crossed. It was just the guild master being selfish again. Ever since he took over 2 years ago, everything's gone downhill. Eurus asked if that was really the case. Right. He wasn't there yet back then. Glingal started slashing budgets, fired half the guards, then raised taxes on top of that. Sure, their city hadn't had any monster disasters, but still, he was cutting way too much. Monsters disasters. Does she mean when a bunch of monsters come spilling out of a dungeon? That's right. There was even a mid-scale one 2 years ago, and they're predicting the next one won't hit for another 10 years. So that must be why the budget was cut. Ferris asked him not to sound impressed as he was the one getting kicked out because of that. Well, she had a good point. Eurus opened his notebook and recorded his 13 kills today. That brings him to 855 for the year. It seems hitting his 1,000 kill goal is slipping out of reach. Ferris pointed to his notebook and had been meaning to ask what that weird marking was. It was just how he tally kills. Each one of them means 5. With a bunch of them like this, it makes it easier to count. Ferris found it cool and asked if that shape meant something. The elders in Eurus's village taught him this. It was a symbol that means right, or just. She asked what language it was from, when Gilius suddenly appeared behind them, asking for food. He stabbed his steak with his fork when he found out about Eurus getting banished in 3 days, and Ferris thought it was insane no matter how one spins it. Gilius agreed. Eurus has been doing a great job and that old geezer just doesn't like Eurus. Now he's going overboard. He and Ferris stood up, marching towards the door to protest, but Eurus held on to them to stop them from going. Meanwhile, Rika sat in the forest, writing reports. Her member informed her that they found 10 orcs, 3 mountain bears, and 2 gargoyles in the northeast forest. Like Rika thought, there has been a surge in monsters ranked D and above. She turned her head when she heard noises coming from there, and hid behind the bushes to spy on what was happening, only to find a horde of monsters walking through the forest. Her face paled from the scene before her. This could be really, really bad. The next day, 2 days before the monster disaster, Eurus went to the forest to meet the dog. He handed him a basket of sandwiches that he made today and told him how he got his hands on that mayo he was looking forward to, so he used it right away. Eurus watched the dog dig in. This was probably the last meal he'll ever make for him, so he better savor every bite. The dog tilted his head in confusion. So Eurus explained that he was summoned to a guild meeting yesterday and was kicked out of the city. So this was probably the last time they'll see each other. But before he left, he had to find a way to thank all the people who helped him. The dog stared at him, leaving his plate half empty. Eurus asked what was wrong and if he was already full, when he suddenly heard a voice asking if he was going somewhere. He jolted up, questioning who was there before looking down at the dog, who asked if he wasn't going to cook anymore. He was confused and asked if the dog just talked, as if it could answer him. Fortunately, it could. That dog introduced himself as Shishu, surprising Eurus that a dog was talking. Shishu suddenly stood up and claimed to not be a dog, but a kobold. They sat across each other, both with their arms crossed. Eurus still couldn't believe that Shishu was a kobold, a magical beast, because it was totally different from what he imagined kobolds would look like. He's just a cuter version of them. On the note, he's never seen a kobold around here before, so he wondered if he was alone. Shishu looked down with a solemn expression. His whole family was killed by a griffin, and only he survived. Hearing about the griffin rang a familiar memory in Eurus's head. Shishu confirmed his suspicion. It was indeed that time he saved Shishu. Shishu was on the verge of death when Eurus saved him and even gave him lots of food to eat. That's why he wanted to repay him. Eurus tried to calm him down, asking whether his name was Shishu and who was the master that he's been calling since earlier. Well, duh. Shishu pointed to himself. His name, Shishu, meant glutton in the kobold language. Then he pointed to Eurus. The word master just meant him, the person he decided to serve. Eurus chuckled. He could see why he's named that way. But even if he says he wants to serve him, Eurus is leaving this town, and he won't be able to see him anymore. Easy peasy. Shishu will just come with him. It seems he had nowhere left to go, so Eurus made up his mind. He stood up, holding out his hand out towards Shishu. Since they were both alone, he suggested traveling together, to which Shishu immediately agreed, and they shook each other's hands. By the way, Eurus was curious how he suddenly started being able to talk. Shishu didn't know, but he was able to gradually start to understand the language after eating Eurus's food. His food? Could it be that he was unconsciously putting buffs in them? A buff is a type of enchantment magic. It boosts allies' combat power, agility, or poison resistance. But he never thought it would let him talk to a kobold. Shishu cheered excitedly as his master seemed to be a great mage. He wasn't that great, but whatever. They should get back to town and prepare for the journey. Right. It might be a bit risky to let Shishu into town, so he just asked him to wait outside, to which he agreed. Eurus looked up and saw a black smoke coming from the direction of the dungeon. Shishu asked what was wrong, but Eurus remained quiet. He was having an awful feeling. It seemed to be the presence of a magical beast, and since he could feel magical essence, he figured it must be the direction of the dungeon. Shishu called out to Eurus again, and when Eurus turned back at him, he was smiling like it was nothing, and began to depart. Back in Diner Ferris and Gilius sat across each other, talking about Eurus. Gilius was questioning if they really were okay with leaving things as they are, but it's not like they could really do anything since Eurus had already made up his mind. There was no way that Gilius would stand for that. Eurus was too kind-hearted, and he's only saying that because he doesn't want to cause them trouble. However, there was nothing they could do as he's already been kicked out of the guild. At that moment, a voice reached them, claiming he still hasn't been kicked out. It was Shirley. She explained that although Eurus may have been exiled by the guildmaster, he hasn't lost his hunter license, so he can still join another guild in a different town. Gilius abruptly stood up, knocking his chair back and questioning whether Shirley was just going to let this slide. Did Eurus even do anything to deserve getting kicked out? Of course, she wasn't okay with it either, but as a clerk, there was nothing she could do. Eurus was honestly a really good guy. When he first came to their town, Gilius's little brother was getting bullied by some punks, and Eurus stepped in to help. Ever since then, they have become best friends. Ferris wasn't aware of that. Anyway, that's the reason why he really wanted to do something to help Eurus, and wondered if there really was nothing they could do. Before Shirley could even answer, Eurus suddenly appeared from behind, asking what everyone was doing gathering there. They were trying to figure out how to help him, but Eurus just told them not to worry about it. Ferris was about to protest when Eurus placed his magic bag down and started rummaging inside. There was something he wanted to give them all. He pulled out a small refrigerator for Ferris. She wondered what that was and how he even got it. It was a magic box. It's bigger on the inside than it looks, and time stands still inside, so she can store tons of fresh food for a long time and could use it for her shop. Shirley interrupted. Noticing that the magic box and even his magic bag were both pretty high-end items. Eurus claimed to have made them all by himself. They were free, so there was no need to hesitate to take them. He handed a pocket watch to the surprised Gilius, who stared at it in awe. Isn't this super high-end as well? Did he make it too? Eurus answered affirmatively and rummaged inside his bag. He made it back when he was still in the village, so there was no need to make that face since it really wasn't a big deal. Gilius noticed a button in the middle of the watch and asked what that was. Eurus stopped him from touching it and explained that it was for the future. If someday he ever finds himself in a situation where he thinks there's no way out, then he can press it. Gilius asked what happens if he presses it, and Eurus just responded that there'll be a way out, confusing Gilius. Eurus didn't say any more and just reminded him not to press it unless it's really, really serious. Lastly, he handed Shirley a tiny bag. It was an amulet he made. He learned how to do it from an old man back in the village, and they say it brings good luck, which was kind of vague. It was because he wasn't sure what to give her, but Shirley gratefully accepted his gift. Now that he had no regrets, it was time to say goodbye. Gilius was surprised that he was already leaving, and Ferris tried to tell him that they'll figure something out, so there was no need to rush. Eurus's grandma in the village used to say, "Strike while the iron's hot," and he's getting kicked out anyway. Shirley asked if he had anywhere to go, and of course he did. He heard from a traveling merchant once that there was a fishing village way down south from there that they said to have a raw fish dish called sashimi. He really wanted to try it, since there was only smoked and dried fish around their town. Really? He's so optimistic. They saw him off at the city gate, bidding farewell. Eurus waves goodbye and begins walking away, meeting with Shishu outside. The three watched him leave, with Shirley worried about Eurus's one-sided banishment as the guild wasn't the kind to allow something like that. What on earth was Glingal thinking? Glingal looked out the window, watching Shirley enter the guild. With this, one more troublesome one is out. He doesn't need anyone in this town who goes against him. Then, he turned to Rika, asking what her report was all about. Rika nervously fidgeted as she informed him that the number of monsters had been abnormal. Glingal was getting tired of hearing her stuttering, so he asked to just spit out what she was trying to say. Rika thinks that it could be a sign of an impending monster calamity, but didn't they just have a monster calamity 2 years ago? So, it shouldn't happen again for another 10 years. Rika explained that the magical essence around the dungeon was also increasing, so they should raise the alert level just in case. However, Glingal did not listen to her. She was well compensated, so she should have no complaints. This can't be. Rika had to do something. One day before the magic beast disaster, the elf woman, Kabos, from Bagan's party was laughing with her fellow women from other parties, when Shirley suddenly approached her, asking to be connected with Bagan as there was something she'd like to ask him. Kabos frowned at her, claiming that Bagan was busy at the moment and didn't have time to waste on someone like her. Shirley did not falter and intimidated her instead, making Kabos eventually agree. Shirley entered Bagan's quarters, where she saw him drinking liquor. He asked what she wanted, but instead of answering, Shirley informed him that Eurus had left the town yesterday. He once apologized to Eurus, didn't he? What did he mean by that? Bagan gulped down his drink, claiming it had nothing to do with her. But the stubborn Shirley replied that she'd be the one to decide that. The guild right now was abnormal, and was way too tyrannical to force Eurus out of town just because he didn't form a party. He fell out of favor with Glingal, that's all. Once a person's marked, there's nothing they can do. Shirley countered that the guildmaster shouldn't even have that much authority, and yet, even all the A-rank hunters agreed with it. No, Bagan was actually against it. But if he had openly disagreed, he wouldn't have gotten away unscathed either. That's right, it was self-preservation. Did she have a problem with that? He just didn't want to lose the position he finally managed to earn. Even so, Eurus was too valuable to let go, and that's why he tried to protect him. He even tried to get him into his party somehow, but that bastard stubbornly refused. She must have noticed it too, right? That Eurus wasn't someone who could be confined to ranks like F or D. Seeing that Bagon seemed to know about Eurus's abilities, Shirley asked him to tell her about them. It was during the first mission he took him along on. The black-haired guy urged Eurus to walk faster or they're leaving him behind, while Eurus complained about the luggage he was carrying. It contained camp supplies like preserved food, healing potions, weapon maintenance tools, and all sorts of other stuff. Eurus questioned why they were carrying something like that, and it was Bagon who answered. Normally, it doesn't work for A-rank hunters like them, but this time, it's also part of his training. Caboose agreed, pointing at him. She's teaching him, a complete rookie, the basics of missions. If it wasn't rotation duty, she'd never do something like this. Bagon pointed towards the pathway. Up ahead was a shared camp. Once they get there, they'll take on their respective missions. Only parties ranked B or higher used the camp, and Caboose sneered at Eurus, claiming that it was a place a rookie like him wouldn't be involved with for a while. They walked further down the pathway, when Eurus suddenly felt something off. At the same time, Bagon pointed to the shared camp. The black-haired guy sighed. All that's left is to drop off the supplies, and the mission's over. Eurus's escort duty ends here as well. Eurus called for their attention, telling them that he's getting a bad feeling. He didn't think they should go further as there might be a magic beast lurking around. The black-haired guy and Caboose turned to each other and burst out laughing. She sighed. He was a total rookie, so he probably didn't know, but no dangerous beasts showed up around there. They've already cleared the area, and the worst he'll see may be F-rank beasts that run away just from sensing them. He's way too scared. Seeing the conflicted expression on Eurus's face, the man beside him, Derriger, thought he was too nervous since it's his first mission, and assured him that whatever happens, it's a level they can handle, so he didn't need to worry about it. At that moment, a monster from up the hill jumped down and crushed Derriger. That monster was a chimera, an A-rank magic beast. The others panicked, while Bagon grabbed his axe from his back, questioning why a chimera was there of all places. The black-haired guy told them to drop their luggage and to get their weapons ready. Bagon was holding his axe and shield when he felt another monster's presence from behind. It was another chimera. He couldn't believe it. The other chimera jumped down, and Eurus was about to attack it when it dashed towards the party members, causing him to halt his attack because he might end up hurting them. Bagon told everyone to run while he drew the chimera's attention. The others ran, causing the other chimera to turn to him. However, he noticed that Eurus was still there, and commanded him to run before fighting off the chimera. But his attack did nothing, and the two monsters joined together. Since they were a bit further from Bagon, Eurus can now use his magic. He jumped towards them, blasting them away and cutting off their bodies with wind magic. Eurus plopped down on the ground while Bagon watched in shock. His party peeked out from the bushes and asked whether their leader was okay. They came out of hiding and exclaimed in amazement after seeing the cut-off bodies of the chimeras, as expected of their leader. Meanwhile, they thought Eurus, who was actually the one who fought them, just froze up in fear and scolded him. He didn't bother correcting them though. Shirley couldn't believe the story Bagon shared, and on top of that, he kept it a secret from them. Was he mocking them? Bagon didn't know. Either way, his skills were undeniable. It was a shame to just hand him over to another party, especially an E-rank or D-rank one, though it doesn't really matter anymore now that he's been kicked out. That must be why he hid the truth as well. Besides, if something like this got out, the party, as your dragon scale, would be a complete disgrace. She could say whatever she wanted. Eurus never joined a party anyway, so sooner or later, Glingal would have turned against him and driven him out. Shirley understood the situation now, and it seems Bagon won't be helping in going against Glingal. Bagon apologized as he didn't want to end up like Eurus or her. Shirley turned confused. What was he talking about? At the same time, Rika ran as fast as she could. She had no choice but to talk to Shirley. Bagon questioned whether she hadn't realized it yet. The only reason she wasn't kicked out was because Glingal feared backlash from those who supported her. Otherwise, she would have been gone long ago. It's better not to go against him. Glingal is a powerful man who was directly appointed as master by the royal capital. Shirley couldn't bear to hear anymore and walked out of his quarters. She walked outside, extremely worried about what would happen to the town her father protected. She can't just stand by and do nothing. Just then, Rika, who's been looking for Shirley everywhere, ran up to her, panting heavily. She tried to explain the situation, but she was panicking so badly that she couldn't form proper words, so Shirley tried to calm her down and ask what had happened. Finally, Rika warned her that a magical beast disaster was going to happen. The day the stampede occurred, Shirley was busy handling the guild alone, running back and forth as hunters called for her help here and there. As the chaos subsided, Shirley leaned on the counter in exhaustion when Gifford suddenly approached her. She stood properly and apologized since the other staff all went on vacation. That was rough. He leaned closer to her and whispered that it seems she didn't have time to question the guildmaster since she was so busy. Seeing her expression, Gifford smirked and asked why she was so surprised. Did she think that Glingal didn't know about her defiance? Shirley backed off in disbelief, but Gifford continued on. Didn't she think that everyone else taking a leave at the same time was a coincidence? Glingal knew exactly what she was thinking. Shirley questioned why the guildmaster was doing this. Gifford believed that since she was a good and honest girl, it was better to keep her trapped than kick her outright. Then, he mocked her. Wasn't she the daughter of the former guild master? So, how does it feel to have her town taken over? She asked why Glingal would do this. Simple, they just wanted to live a comfy life in this peaceful town. Light work with high pay, a top hunter position, and no stampedes. As long as Glingal likes them, their lives are set. That's why they really didn't need someone poking around where they shouldn't. Shirley was about to protest, but G-Ford just forced her to accept it. They won't treat her badly. After all, she loved this town, didn't she? The town her father protected. She slapped his hand away and informed him that there were signs of a stampede, so they needed to act quickly. G-Ford didn't believe her and questioned if she seriously believed that coward. Rick is nonsense. A stampede just happened 2 years ago, so the possibility of another stampede happening was low. Shirley tried to say something, but Geoffrey glared at her for being persistent and warned her that if she keeps stirring things up, she'll be out of this town too. Hardly anyone supports her anymore anyway. At the same time, at the city walls, 2 guards noticed a black smoke rising up the sky. Inside the dungeon, the man with half of his face covered by a black reptilian mask stood by the dungeon's core, staring at the crystal that emitted a huge magic essence that shot up through the sky. The guards couldn't believe what they're seeing. A black smoke was enveloping the sky. One of the guards, Julius, knew what this was. It was a stampede. The guards hurriedly rang the bell, surprising everyone who heard it. Julius, at the top of his lungs, shouted to warn everyone that a stampede had begun, and for all personnel to prepare for defense. Geoffrey didn't understand what was going on, and questioned what all the commotion was about. Shirley pushed him away and opened the guild's door, only to find a black sky above them. Inside that black sky, countless magic beasts began to emerge and land on the ground. The guard captain could not believe what he was seeing. The number of those beasts wasn't right. They've never seen a stampede this huge before. He immediately ordered Gilius to contact the Hunter Guild. However, they were interrupted when another guard called for their attention while pointing to the sky. Monsters were being carried by winged-typed magical beasts. They're trying to enter from the sky. He commanded them to grab their arrows and to shoot them down, but the monsters already got past them and landed inside the city. An ogre, an A-rank magical beast, landed before the guards, who hurriedly evacuated the civilians. Geoffrey thought this had to be a joke, as they weren't told that a stampede wouldn't happen, as if Rika and Shirley didn't warn them a billion times. Shirley ran back to the guild and into Glingal's office to inform him that a stampede had occurred and to ask for orders. Glingal stayed rooted in his place, so she had to approach him, and when she did, she saw him sweating profusely, claiming that this wasn't supposed to happen. Shirley insisted that this was real, and that when a stampede happens, the guild master is required to lead the hunters and guards, so he had to prepare immediately. Glingal backed up, slapping her hand away, and exclaiming that stampedes weren't supposed to happen for the next 10 years, so this must be some kind of mistake. Shirley reminded him that several beasts had already entered the city, but he did not care and insisted that this wasn't possible. That's the reason he chose his town. She should deal with it instead. Gilius, who walked in the guild master's office to ask for orders, witnessed Shirley slapping Glingal. What a disgrace of a guild master he was. He should just stay there and cower in fear. She walked out of the door, asking Gilius to watch over Glingal and to make sure that he doesn't run away. She walked down to the guild's first floor and commanded the hunters in place of the guild master to gather their party members, gear up, and assemble at the front gate. They all just stared at her in daze, so she shouted for them to move, and so they did in a panic. Geoffrey approached her, asking what was going on and what happened to Glingal. He had abandoned his duties, so Shirley asked whether he was going to disgrace himself by fleeing as well. Meanwhile, Wilhelm's party members sought him out to inform him that a stampede had broken out, and that this was the time to show their chivalry. They should show those beasts the courage of knights. However, Wilhelm stayed unmoving on his chair, so his party members grabbed his shoulders, causing the armor to fall apart. It turns out he ran away already and set up his armor that way to hide that fact. Meanwhile, Shirley went to the city's front gate where the guards were fighting an ogre, with Geoffrey following behind her, asking what she was doing. But she ignored him and just continued walking towards the fight. The ogre roared, blasting the guards away. Shirley picked up the sword and shield that a guard dropped and approached the ogre. After noticing her presence, it raised its fist to punch her, but she parried its fist with the shield, causing the ogre's wrist to dislocate. As the ogre screamed in pain, Shirley took that chance to slice off its other arm. Geoffrey hid behind the wall, unable to believe what Shirley just did. The whole city was being attacked by monsters, while Bagan and the other hunters fought them off, wondering what the hell was going on. Shirley ran up the city walls and asked the guard captain about the situation. He turned to her and asked where Glingal was, so Shirley explained that she will be taking command in his place, as he is not coming. The guard captain could not believe that Glingal was such a coward that he'd desert his post. In any case, they'll be fine with Shirley there. He asked her to look at the horde of monsters coming to invade their town. It was a stampede on a scale they've never seen before, and honestly, they didn't have the forces to hold them off. Shirley believed that they still had time before the enemy's main force arrived, so they should deal with the advance party that's already broken through and prioritize the evacuation of the citizens. The guard captain would love to do that, but they didn't have enough soldiers, and he pointed to the side. What's more, they only had one ballista. Shirley was surprised at the number of ballistas they had, so he explained that it was because of Glingal. He used obsolescence and budget cuts as excuses for this mess, so they're left with minimal equipment and personnel. That mother trucker. If only they'd known it would come to this. They've already sent a fast horse to the Royal Capital's Regional Defense Force, but there's no way they'll make it in time. It seems they have no choice but to commit to a full defense. Shirley grabbed a sword and asked the guard captain to prioritize civilian evacuation and deploy his men accordingly, and also to get some defensive barricades on the bridge. The hunters will engage with the monsters at the front gate. Soon, the defensive barricades were placed on the bridge, and the hunters stood before the closed gate, with Shirley explaining that they'll stop the main force of magical beasts from entering the city at the front gate. The black-haired guy and caboose from Bagan's party interrupted her and asked why a receptionist like her was taking command. If the guildmaster wasn't gonna do it, then Bagan was right there. Soon, all of the hunters were raging with complaints, but the old man from Bagan's party, Ransoof, suddenly shouted that the Valkyrie was reborn, causing everyone to shut up and turn to him. He had been waiting for this moment, for the day when she would rise once more as the Valkyrie. His fellow party members asked what was wrong with him, as they didn't remember him being that kind of character, but he just scolded them. They, who only got to town in the last 2 years, wouldn't know. But Shirley is actually the daughter of the former guildmaster, and what's more, she was the strongest A-rank hunter in the town of Nyanire. She defeated countless magical beasts, and in the last stampede, she stood at the vanguard and fought with true courage. For her beauty and valor, she was known as the Valkyrie. He had kept the faith and waited for her. Shirley tried to stop him as she was starting to get embarrassed when Bagan stepped up and agreed with Ransoof. Right now, she was the only one who could lead them through this, and he promised that they'd follow her. Shirley nodded her head and asked everyone to entrust their lives to her before walking out of the front gate. They were met with a horde of monsters rushing towards them. Some of the hunters couldn't believe the insane number of beasts and thought it was impossible. Shirley raised her sword and told them that they'll form a defensive line with the bridge as their base. The mages and archers were to split to the left and right flanks and prepare to engage. Just then, Shirley heard a voice saying they were ready on their end. It was Rika, who was at the top of the city walls. They'll use loudspeaker magic to update everyone on the situation. She has her members positioned throughout the city, and they'll report on the civilian evacuation progress and the locations of any beasts that get inside. Shirley thanked her, but was interrupted by Ankh. It looks like they didn't have time to stand around chatting because the faster magical beasts were already there. Shirley commanded them to hold on to their battle stations, when Gifford stepped in with a smug smile, claiming he'd handle the situation. Women cheered for him, squealing about how cool he was. He turned to Shirley, unsheathing his sword. He'd rather not be mistaken for a coward, so he decided to fight. Gifford pulled out his sword, daring the beast to come at him, and he'll turn all of them to dust on his hero's sword. He raised his sword to cut the incoming beasts, but his oh-so-great hero's sword ended up breaking. How anticlimactic. The monster sneered at him, so the weakling crawled pathetically on the ground to go back to the hunter's side, asking for help. The women looked down at him, commenting about how lame he was. He really was just a pretty face, but was overall weak. The monster approached the confused Gifford from behind, so Shirley stepped on his shoulders and jumped up to slash the monster in two. He questioned whether he was a stepping stone, while Shirley shouted for them to charge, announcing the start of the battle. Both sides roared as they charged towards each other, with Rika and the guards' support from the city walls. It was at that moment that Rika looked up after noticing something. While Shirley and the hunters were charging towards the magical beasts, with the mages using magic from behind, Rika watched the black sky as an even bigger and terrifying monster emerged from there. She couldn't believe what she was seeing, and warned Shirley about it. Back inside the city, Gilius fought countless monsters as he made his way to find Ferris and to make sure she had gotten away. Just then, a winged-type monster landed behind him, causing him to get blown away by the impact. He got up, confused, and looked back. He stood frozen in fear before the huge dragon, an SS-rank magical beast. Shirley looked back at the city gate as she could feel its presence even from outside. While Bagan informed her that a dragon has appeared, another hunter shouted in panic, informing her that the gate had been crushed. Shirley ran towards it, but Ankh stopped her from trying to force it open. Although they were worried about the people inside the city, the whole wall would collapse and bury them if they forced the gate open. Then, they'd have no escape route. Without a warning, the dragon began to wreak havoc inside the city and release dragon breath, burning the houses and buildings lined up. Gilius could not believe what he was seeing and thought everything was now hopeless. He hurriedly grabbed the pocket watch Eurus gave him inside his shirt. Eurus told him to push the button in the center when things get so bad that it seems hopeless. So, he decided to put his faith in him and proceeded to push the button, hoping that it would work. At the same time, in another town, Eurus and Shishu arrived before the vast sea, an ocean of delicious seafood. They jumped up, claiming they'd eat a lot, when they suddenly vanished into thin air. Gilius opened his eyes, but nothing happened. He shouted for Eurus, complaining that nothing's happening. His loud voice caught the dragon's attention, and it leaned down towards him. Gilius tried to crawl away as the dragon opened its mouth, when its head suddenly fell off. Gilius's mouth fell to the floor after hearing that familiar voice, asking if he was okay. It was Eurus. Alexa, play Hey Daddy by Usher. In the middle of the ongoing battle outside the city, Shirley told all the injured to fall back and get treatment from the medics, while the hunters protected them so they could get healed without worries. Bagan, who just slashed a goblin with his axe, shouted that they weren't even making a dent in the monster's numbers, and that it was hopeless. They couldn't hold them back, but Shirley insisted on just buying as much time as they could, until the regional defense force arrived. At that moment, a monster jumped from behind her to hit her with its fists. She was able to block it with her sword to lessen the damage, but she still got flung away. She gritted her teeth in determination, landing back on the ground and stabbing the approaching monster with her sword and cutting it in half. Blood dripped down her mouth as her vision began to blur. She apologized to her father as she might not be able to save the town he gave his life to protect. Suddenly, a huge barrier enveloped the hunters' area, blasting the magical beasts away. The hunters looked around with baffled expressions at the sudden spell when a person landed before Shirley, apologizing for being late. It was Eurus, along with Shishu. Eurus just smiled at Shirley's surprised call before crouching down to give her back her glasses. Bagan was also surprised to see him, as he thought that he had already left town. However, Julius called him back. Things were even worse than he imagined. He ignored the confused Bagan and pulled his bag off of him. First things first, healing and resupplying everyone was the priority. Eurus turned his bag upside down, and various weapons, armor, and restocks of arrows fell. Also, he handed a potion to Shirley in order to fully restore her stamina. She thought that the townspeople needed this more than them, but Eurus assured her that they were already taken care of. Back in the city, an old woman hugged her grandchildren as a goblin approached them. They suddenly heard footsteps, and in the blink of an eye, the goblin flew back after getting hit by a pan. It was Ferris. Although terrified, she did her best to help them run away. Like hell, she'd let monsters like them to do whatever they wanted with their town. Just then, an orc with a hella cool mohawk appeared from behind the wall. The courage Ferris had earlier immediately disappeared as her knees buckled and caused her to collapse on the ground. It was no use. She screamed, trying to get away, when a spear cut through the orc's head. It was Gilius, asking whether she was okay. Ferris cried, still holding the pan. She thought she was a goner. He comforted her and said there was no need to worry now that she's safe. But wait a minute. What's with his new gear? Gilius smirked, showing off his new armor that was given by Eurus, who came back. With the potions and equipment he gave them, they'll be invincible. He urged Ferris to get out of there, but she refused because there were still people who hadn't been able to escape. And besides, this was her and her dad's shop, so she won't let some monsters destroy it. Gilius took off his helmet and armor to put it on her. That armor was enchanted, so it'll keep those monsters off her, and he assured her that there was no need to worry about him as he fought better when he's light on his feet. Ferris called for Gilius, who was already running away, but he just told her not to worry about a thing and swore to come back for her alive. No, that's not what she's trying to say. The armor was so heavy that she couldn't move. She stayed slumped on the floor, hoping that somebody would help her. Meanwhile, outside the city, the black-haired guy and Caboose couldn't believe that a rookie like Eurus could do something like that. However, Rika vouched for him, claiming it was true. Eurus was unbelievably strong and even took down a dragon in a single blow. Shirley was relieved to see her safe, and Rika claimed it was all thanks to Eurus, so they had to trust him. After hearing her words, Shirley drank the potion Eurus gave without any hesitation, and soon beamed with overflowing power. It seems to be enchantment magic. The black-haired guy and Caboose looked at each other. After seeing Shirley, all of them gulped down the potion Eurus gave them. Soon they were all overflowing with power thanks to the high elixir they drank, making Caboose wonder where in the world did he even get something like that. About that, the people in Eurus's village taught him how, so he actually made it himself. Though they didn't believe him, thinking it was a lie. Eurus just ignored Caboose and turned to Bagan, informing him that the barrier was about to break, so he needed to go. Bagan asked where he was going, and he pointed outside the barrier, where the magical beasts were patiently waiting. He'll finish them off, so they should take care of any that get past him. However, Bagan protested, even for someone like him, that's an impossible number of enemies. What they had to do was to hold out there until reinforcements arrived, but Eurus was hard-headed. He just smiled at him and said that he was counting on him before dashing off, with Shishu following closely behind him. With this much space and this many of them, he didn't have to hold back. He pressed his palms together, activating ice magic, and once he opened them back up, numerous ice spears appeared around him. With a swift command from his hands, the ice spears rained down on the magical beasts, freezing them. Then, he used earth magic to punch the ground, destroying the frozen monsters and burying them underground. The man inside the dungeon halted for the first time and turned around after noticing a strange presence. Meanwhile, Eurus bombarded the horde of monsters with attack after attack. When he landed back on the ground, he stared at his hand, wondering why he felt more powerful than usual. Then, he pressed on his ear to communicate with Shishu and asked if he was okay. He didn't have to push himself and can wait back in town. Shishu jumped between two monsters, causing them to run into each other, and replied to Eurus that he's totally fine. Thanks to Eurus's food, he was bursting with energy. He suddenly paused when he noticed a griffin standing in his way. Back then, Shishu couldn't do anything, not even when they killed his family, but he promised never to lose again. He jumped up and bit the griffin's neck. A little chomp and its head was off its body. Once Shishu landed back on the ground, he cheered about his victory. Eurus smiled watching Shishu, but he soon had to turn back around as more monsters popped up. No matter how many they took down, more just kept pouring out of those black clouds. They're getting nowhere like this. He opened his arms as he used light magic, letting out a huge beam of light towards the sky. However, the hole it made just turned back to normal. It was no use. It just closed up again. It seems they had to strike the dungeon itself, the source of all this. He informs Shishu that he's going to the dungeon and that he needs to fall back to where Shirley and the others are. However, Shishu refused and insisted that he could still fight. No matter how much Eurus told him to regroup with everyone as it was too dangerous, Shishu still stubbornly insisted that they had to stick together no matter what. Eurus looked back at the monsters. Well, it might actually be safer if he took Shishu with him. He jumped up using wind magic and called for Shishu to get on his back. Then, they flew towards the direction of the dungeon. Shirley noticed that the number of the magical beasts was falling and commanded the hunters to push them back all at once, with the Azure Dagon scale leading the charge. It's the moment they've been waiting for. They can finally show them how awesome they are. Bagan raised his shield, commanding his members to unleash their powers. He dashed forward and took down a monster with his shield, while the others also showcased their overwhelming powers. On the other hand, Eurus finally arrived at the forest to enter the dungeon, using accelerating wind to blast them straight to the core. It was a ghost town in there, and here he was expecting a swarm of magical beasts to attack. He stopped abruptly when he noticed that the path ended, and there was no more ground for him to walk in. Everything was breaking apart and falling down at the very end. It looked like the dungeon was collapsing, making Eurus wonder what was going on. In any case, this gives them a straight shot to the core. He used his wind magic to rush down, and once he landed at the ground, the only thing he saw was a double door at the end of the hallway. He kicked the door open and entered the room where the man with the reptilian mask was. He turned to Eurus, who was extremely confused. Was this man the dungeon boss? He didn't know how to put it, but he wasn't sure if that man was a human. The man finally understood why everything felt so off. It was because of Eurus. Eurus blasted the man with magic as it looked like they had no choice but to take him down. However, the man repelled his attack and dashed forward, grabbing Eurus by the throat. The man was confused and mumbled about things only he understood. It seems Eurus is connected with the hero. He wasn't able to finish his sentence because Shishu jumped up and punched his mask away, causing him to let go of Eurus. He pushed Shishu back while covering his face with his other hand. Eurus was baffled when he saw the man's face. That person looked exactly like him, just with a different hair color. The man raised his hand and pushed Eurus to the wall with force. Seeing his master coughing up blood, Shishu immediately ran to him. Once he got closer, he looked back and forth towards the two, wondering what the hell was going on and why there were two masters before him. The man put his mask back on as Eurus questioned his identity. He is the Dungeon Master. That's the name he goes by now. If he's the Dungeon Master, then that means he's the one who created all the world's dungeons, and the source of the stampedes and magical beasts disasters. That's right, he created all the dungeons and managed them. Eurus scowled at the Dungeon Master. It was his fault that everyone was having a hard time. The Dungeon Master cut him off, claiming that everyone was actually pleased. Monsters are born from dungeons, and humans hunt them. They earn rewards, food, and livelihood from it. He even made it so that dungeons generate treasures humans would enjoy. All of that was part of his design. Eurus angrily shouted that humans were dying from magical beast attacks, but the Dungeon Master responded like it was a matter of fact. Of course, if humans hunt beasts, then beasts will hunt humans. That's what coexistence means. More importantly, he questioned why Eurus was there, and what he intended to do by appearing before him now. Eurus turned confused, and wondered what he was talking about. It seems he hasn't been told anything, perhaps that was for the best. Then, he decided to give him one piece of advice. No matter what he does, humans will never accept him. Of course, neither will they, the demons. His role was already over, so he should just quietly fade away with Shishu, and he declared that he will be alone for all eternity, confusing Eurus. What did his words even mean? At that moment, the crystal that seemed to be the dungeon's core broke into pieces and seemed to have discharged all the mana. The Dungeon Master held another core in his hand and replaced the core that broke. This will do. Now the dungeon will stabilize. A magical beast disaster is a temporary rampage caused by an unstable dungeon core, and that core has reached its limit. Replacing it will restore stability, and the disaster will cease. Then, he bid farewell to Eurus, claiming they'd never meet again. Eurus tried to run after him, but he already disappeared in thin air. He frustratedly cursed, wondering what the hell was going on, when Shishu approached him, helping him calm down a bit. Everyone outside must be worried, so they should get out of the dungeon for now. Back outside, Shirley stared at the monsters' bodies around them, wondering if it was all over. Seeing that the black sky was gone, the hunters cheered for their victory, glad that they managed to stop the magical beast disaster. Bagan walked over to Shirley, claiming that it was their victory. Hearing that, Shirley finally relaxed and collapsed on the floor. She was so glad. From a distance, a woman with a mask covering half of her face watched the situation from up the hill, wondering what had happened. It seems everything has already been taken care of. She is Aiko, leader of the Shadow Clan. A man approached her from behind, asking about the situation. Well, as he could see, the magical beast disaster was no longer. The man suggested regrouping with the city's defense force for now. Meanwhile, Shishu urged his master, Eurus, to go faster as they rushed through the dungeon doors that were about to close. They huffed breathlessly as they watched the dungeon door close from the outside. Eurus couldn't believe that the collapsed dungeon was restoring itself. They were so close to being crushed or trapped. Anyway, they should head back. The man Aiko was talking to, along with his group, arrived at the city's front gate. He is Hugh Aldridge, commander of the Regional Defense Corps. He came in response to the emergency request, but it seems they had already taken care of everything. Shirley introduced herself as a clerk from the Hunter Guild, while the Azure Dragon's scale members, mainly the black-haired dude and Caboose, boasted about taking care of all the monsters themselves. Hugh decided to just ignore them and turned back to Shirley, requesting to speak with Glingal, the guildmaster. He asked where he was, and it was Gilius who responded. He jumped down, carrying Glingal over his shoulder like a sack of rice, and threw him on the ground. Glingal, who was tied up, angrily threatened Gilius, but Gilius just told him to shut up. He seriously tried to run away, so he had to tie him up. Glingal got up and noticed Hugh, so he kneeled and requested for him to arrest those so-called traitors as they dared to rebel against him, the guildmaster. They should all get exiled. Shirley immediately tried to explain that there was a reason for it, but Hugh just raised his hand to cut her off and said that there was no need. This actually saved them the trouble. He pulled out a letter and arrested Glingal because he was suspected of forging the royal decree appointing a guildmaster. He was originally supposed to be assigned as guildmaster to Went, in the western part of the continent. So why was he in Mjolnir? The hunters around him began whispering amongst themselves. Went, that's the rundown farming village. Hugh continued. On top of that, he just heard that he tried to flee during an unprecedented monster disaster. Glingal claimed that it was a misunderstanding and asked him to listen to his side. Very well, he will hear him out. At the royal capital's high court, that is. He ordered one of his men to put Glingal on a horse, who immediately did as he said. Gilius watched in disbelief. He couldn't believe that Glingal was a fake guild master. Hugh got off his horse and approached Shirley, the so-called battle maiden he's heard about. He asked if she was the one who led the defense this time, to which she answered affirmatively. As expected of the daughter of former guild master, Albert Drinton. They must begin Nyanayar's reconstruction immediately, but they currently lack a guild master to lead it. Therefore, by his authority, he appointed her, Shirley Drinton, as the acting guild master. He asked if she had any objections, and she looked back at the hunters, as if unsure if she really deserved it. But they were all smiling, and Bagan even told her it suited her, so she eventually accepted. The hunters cheered, and when she made eye contact with Eurus among the crowd, he gave her a thumbs up that immediately made her smile. After that, under acting guild master Shirley's leadership, reconstruction of Nyoneer began, and 2 weeks have passed since then. Gilius exclaimed in confusion after hearing that Eurus would be leaving town. Well, Eurus just figured that it was about time. Gilius questioned why, when his expulsion was already revoked, but Eurus just smiled without answering. Their heads turned when they heard people approaching them. It was Shirley and Ferris. Gilius was surprised to see Shirley in her new outfit. Well, everyone in town said that since she's the guild master now, she needed to dress the part. Ferris sighed. Shirley couldn't set a proper example if she's still wearing her receptionist uniform. Eurus complimented Shirley, making her blush. Ferris looked proud as she informed them that it seemed like Shirley was going to become the official guild master. Apparently, the master who was originally appointed took a liking to the peaceful town of Went, where there aren't any major monster beast hunts, and turned down the new post. And that's how the guild master in Nyoneer became vacant. So then, Hugh Aldridge of the Regional Defense Force gave her a strong recommendation. Gilius was glad to hear that. If Shirley was the master, their town would be in good hands. Shirley asked Eurus if it was true that he's leaving, to which he agreed. Ferris thought of something and grabbed Gilius, claiming they had something to take care of. Gilius confusedly looked at her and asked what it was, but she didn't answer and just told him to come. It was so they could give Shirley and Eurus some privacy. Gilius just waved his hand to bid the two goodbye while getting dragged by Ferris, and Eurus quietly waved back at him with a smile. Shirley sat next to him. She was the one who personally nullified the expulsion order from Glingal, so there's absolutely no need for him to leave the town. And Eurus knew that. He still remembered the day he left his hometown and came to Nyoneer. Everything he saw, everyone he met, it was all so new. It was a real struggle. But he found work and thought that maybe he could finally settle down there. However, things didn't really go his way. He was always getting into fights with other hunters, and he also caused her a ton of trouble. That's when he realized that he still knew so little about the world, about the people who live there, and about the monster beasts. He frowned as he remembered the dungeon master. That's why he's decided to go on a journey. For now, he thought of heading to the town of Narrant. It was his original plan anyway, and it seemed like a good place to start. Besides, he still hasn't given up on eating sashimi. Shirley understood his sentiments. In that case, she handed him a letter. She had a feeling that he might decide to do this one day, so she made preparations. It was a letter of introduction from the guildmaster of Nyanayar. With this, his hunter registration in Narrant should go off without a hitch. Eurus thanked her and put the letter inside his magic bag. Shirley advised him to ask for a girl there named Ninya. She was sure that Ninya would take good care of him. Then, she handed him a bag of gold coins. It's his reward for his role in the monster beast catastrophe. The number of monster beasts that he defeated was well over 1,000, and to be honest, that amount wasn't nearly enough for what he did, and they were planning to pay the rest in installments. But wasn't he an F-rank hunter? He shouldn't be getting a reward. About that, she was using her authority to temporarily suspend that rule, so it was fine. Eurus took only 1 gold coin and claimed that that much was more than enough. He'll donate the rest to the town so they could use it for the reconstruction fund. She's already short on money because of Glingal anyway. Shirley tried to counter, explaining that they've recovered most of the taxes Glingal unjustly collected and were also receiving funds from the royal capital. Eurus cut her off with a smile, and Shirley immediately understood what he meant. She promised to gratefully put that money to good use. Suddenly the sound of the bell cut through their conversation. It was already that time. Shirley stood up and urged Eurus to go. It was time to pay their respects for those they lost. She, along with the hunters, stood before the countless graves. Many lives were lost in this monster beast catastrophe. They will never forget this tragedy, and will never cease to move forward. They do it for them, for all those who were sacrificed. After paying his respects, Eurus decided to head out, and asked Gilius to call him if anything happened using the pocket watch he gave him. Gilius seemed to have remembered something and dragged Eurus a bit further from the women. Actually, he was planning to confess to Ferris. He thinks that they've gotten a lot closer after this whole mess, and if they happen to get married, he wanted him there to celebrate with them. Eurus nudged him and promised to be there. Behind them, Ferris was questioning what they were whispering about, and Gilius just claimed that it was nothing. Yeah, nothing at all. Bagan approached them, asking if Eurus was leaving town. Indeed he was, but before that, he wanted to apologize for all the trouble he caused him. Bagan told him not to be a fool. He was the one who should be apologizing. He bowed down and apologized to Eurus, surprising even his own members. Bagan knew a sliver of Eurus's true strength, yet he said nothing to anyone because he wanted to recruit him into the Azure Dragon's scale. And because of that, he couldn't stop his expulsion. He kneeled down, claiming that this was the result. The catastrophe caused this much damage all because of him. If he hadn't been so obsessed with his own stupid pride, none of this would have happened. Eurus grabbed his shoulder, telling him that he was wrong. As he knew, his fighting style tends to endanger his allies. That's why it was always easier for him to work alone, and he's the one who never bothered to explain that properly. He knew that hunters are supposed to help each other, but in spite of that, he just told everyone to leave him be, as he'll do it alone. He was forcing his own selfish ways on all of them. They only survived the stampede monster beast catastrophe because no one gave up. It wasn't Bagan's fault, and it wasn't just Eurus who saved the day. Bagan held his hand, apologizing to him and to everyone. After that heartfelt apology, Eurus finally stood up to depart. He waved his hand to bid them farewell, but turned around when he heard Shirley call for him. She reminded him that Naya will always be his other home, so he's welcome to come back anytime. Eurus smiled at her and turned to leave, when he suddenly remembered something. He turned back around to remind Gilius to invite him to the wedding. Gilius' face flushed red, cursing him out because that was just a secret, and began running after him. Whoops, time to go. Eurus activated quick acceleration magic, making Gilius unable to catch up. At the same time, the Dungeon Master visited the Sea King underwater. The Sea King recognized him and scoffed about how far he's fallen, calling himself the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master ignored his words and instead warned him of Eurus, the one who looked like him. That was all, and then he bid farewell. The Sea King smirked. He had no idea what his game was, but what did he take him for? He is the Sea King Leviathan, the one true ruler of the seas. The two finally reached Narant and fished for his lovely sashimi. However, they seemed to have come across a problem. Shishu complained that he was hungry, but Eurus still hasn't caught a single fish yet. 3 hours ago, the two finally made it to the town of Narant. First, they decided to find the Hunters Guild, get registered, and then grab some food. They walked through the town, with Shishu sniffing around and asking what that weird smell was. That's the scent of the tide. He'll probably get used to it soon. Eurus noticed hunters looking their way, and crouched down to tell Shishu not to speak so loudly in the middle of the town, because it'll be a hassle if they find out he's a kobold. Once they reached the market, Eurus felt excited. There were so many kinds of fresh seafood lined up. No, wait, there's barely any. Eurus turned to the vendor to ask about the sashimi everyone was raving about in this town. The vendor observed him with crossed arms and noticed that he didn't seem to be from around there, and told him that they don't serve fish to outsiders. But Eurus heard that Narant was known for its rich seafood. However, the vendor insisted that they didn't have any. Eurus scratched the back of his head, not knowing what to do, and just asked for directions to the Hunter Guild instead. The vendor pointed towards a small building around there. As Eurus was about to walk away, the vendor mumbled how unlucky he was, coming to Narant at a time like this. Eurus turned to him in confusion and walked away to enter the guild. Once inside, the hunters sitting on the first floor all turned to him, and the air was soon filled with tension. Eurus politely greeted them as he walked towards the counter, wondering if anyone was there. A person, or more like a cat, crouching down made her presence known, and stood up to face him. It was a woman with short hair, who seemed to be a cat beastkin. Eurus asked if there was someone at the reception, and the woman informed him that she was the receptionist of this guild. Oh then, she must be Ninya. Ninya asked how he knew her name, so he handed her the letter Shirley gave him. Ninya read it when she noticed something off and looked around in confusion, before peeking down the counter to see Shishu. She screamed in shock. She thought something smelled weird, and there really was a dog there. She ordered the hunters on the first floor to kick Shishu out, but Eurus tried to explain that Shishu is his partner, and he isn't gonna do anything bad. However, Ninya really hated dogs. They stink, and she didn't like that stupid face sucking up to people. So she ordered them to get him out of the shop. Eurus apologized and asked Shishu to wait outside, who immediately followed his request. Ninya read the letter, complaining that a troublesome fellow has come, and maybe it'd be better to just kick them out quickly. She paused when she saw a letter from Shirley, and stared at Eurus after reading it. He felt a tad bit uncomfortable and asked about the registration. Finally, Ninya agreed to register him. He wondered if she wasn't going to run it by the guild master, which she didn't need to because she handled all jobs of this level herself, so there was no need to bother her big sis for some F-rank job like this. She smugly smiled and boasted about her big sis being the master in their guild, but his timing's really bad because there's no hunter work in Narant right now. Eurus questioned why, and claimed that he'd be fine with goblin hunting or something similar. Ninya explained that land beasts don't show up around there. The main work there is escorting fishermen and taking down sea monsters, which Eurus thought was totally fine with him. But the thing is, no one can go fishing right now, so there's no hunter work either. Lately, the fish have completely disappeared, and they can only catch small fish near the shore at best. Eurus asked why, but Ninya didn't know the reason. Anyway, even if he went out fishing now, he'll just get attacked by monsters and not catch a single fish. Eurus could not believe it. He was really looking forward to eating sashimi, but right now, anything beyond what the townsfolk eat gets dried and shipped out. Thanks to that, the town's finances are in the red. She peeked at Eurus, who was sulking on the counter, and questioned whether he's really as amazing as Shirley says. She knew there's no way that Shirley would lie about something like that, but it's kinda hard to believe, especially since he looks like a total goof. Anyway, that's the reason why they can't afford to feed him, so he'd be better off heading to another town. Eurus slammed the counter, refusing to go. He didn't come all this way just to leave without eating sashimi. Isn't there any way he can get some fish? Well, if he wanted to eat it that bad, he could go catch it himself. Ninya called one of the hunters. If it's shore fishing, he might be able to catch some small fish. She lent him a fishing rod that the hunter she called brought over, and told him he could fish around wherever he wanted. So, that's why he's sitting at the shore right now, sighing because he still hasn't caught anything. He can't even eat a single grilled fish, let alone sashimi. It seems he'll just have to catch something himself somehow. Shishu suggested using magic to catch a bunch of fish, but Eurus didn't want to get kicked out of town for doing something reckless. Shishu complained that he was hungry and wanted to eat fish. So Eurus handed him dried meat and asked him to bear with it for now. If they catch some fish, they'll grill it with salt and eat it together. Still, he wondered if it really was okay to be this relaxed right now. He thought about the dungeon master who looked exactly like him. He wanted to chase him down and get some answers, but he had no idea where he went. He remembered what the dungeon master said and questioned why they looked so alike and why he seemed to know who he was. According to him, humans won't accept Eurus. Well, sure, he's not great with people, but it's not like he's that bad. And why would a demon say something like that anyway? He gets why demons would hate him. He and everyone in the village does. No, wait. If that's the case, then why does the dungeon master look like him? Does he have something to do with him? Like a long-lost sibling or something? Nah, no way. There's no such thing as demons being siblings with humans. Or is there? He couldn't believe it, and wondered if everyone in the village was hiding something from him. No, even if they were, at this point, it was too late anyway since they're all gone. He was pulled out from his thoughts when Shishu excitedly told him that he'd hooked one. He immediately pulled the rod. He did it. Now they can eat some fish. It was quite heavy and seems to be a big catch. He pulled the rod with all his strength and was baffled once he saw what they caught. It was an unconscious fishman. Eurus scratched the back of his head as Ninya wondered what in the world was going on while looking at the fishman, who's now awake. He is Fuka, a fishman warrior. He announced that their lord, Gyoshin, needs their help. Ninya asked if something had happened to His Excellency, and Fuka insisted that it was just Lord Gyoshin. She should get it right. Ninya frowned, and just asked this pain in the tail fishman warrior to explain in detail. Fuka explained that the sea is under invasion by the Sea King and is on the brink of collapse. It's humiliating, but they're hopelessly outnumbered and are unable to handle this on their own. That is why Gyoshin sent him as his envoy to borrow their strength. Ninya questioned who the Sea King was, and Fuka explained that it was a fiend who calls himself king of the sea's demonic beasts. For a long time, the Sea King feared Gyoshin's power and hid himself away. But he's taken advantage of Gyoshin's fading power to invade their undersea castle. Ninya asked why Gyoshin's power faded, but Fuka dismissed any more questions and claimed that it was their crisis, so she should just shut the hell up and help them. Ninya got ticked off at his way of asking for a favor, and questioned what was in it for them if they helped. Fuka scowled, but tried to remain calm. They haven't been catching many fish lately, right? That's because the Sea King's army is prowling these waters, and they've scared all the fish away. Ninya agreed. This is definitely a matter of life and death for them as well. Hearing that, Fuka urged them to lend them a hand, but there was a problem. They couldn't dive into the sea because they couldn't breathe underwater, unlike fishmen. Fuka sat back down helplessly, thinking that things were completely hopeless. Ninya claimed they'd love to help, but there's nothing they can do. Suddenly, Eurus raised his hand to inform them he could go, since he knows a spell for underwater breathing. It'll be his first time diving in the ocean, but he's sure he'll manage. However, just him alone isn't enough, and can they really count on a scrawny-looking guy like him? Ninya didn't know either since he only just got there today. Just then, a woman came in and thought it was a fine idea to entrust this situation to Eurus. She is Nianyo, the master of Narant's guild and Ninya's big sis. She's heard all about him from Ninya. Apparently he's the hero who saved the town of Neonair. Eurus waved his hand and thought it wasn't a big deal, while Ninya claimed that this was a town-wide crisis, so they couldn't just leave it so some shady guy they just met. Nianyo countered that Eurus was recommended by Shirley, so it should be fine. Besides, it's not as if they had any other choice since no one else can go underwater. She asked Eurus if that water-breathing spell can be used on others, which he answered, of course. However, it will be difficult to recast the spell if they're busy fighting underwater, so the most he could manage was only 2 people. That was perfect. In that case, they'll have Ninya accompany him. Ninya agreed without thinking, but when she realized it was her, she exclaimed in confusion and asked why. It's because they can't have a newcomer bear all the responsibility, and they also need to see for themselves if he's truly as skilled as they say. Ninya wept, asking for someone else to go since she couldn't swim. She does have a point, so Nianyo asked Eurus if he had any good ideas. Well, he can cast a spell on a boat and have Ninya ride it. That was a splendid idea. Then they'll arrange for a boat. Of course, Ninya protested, questioning why they were all talking like it's already decided she's going. After a few more discussions, Fuka asked if everything was settled, and Nianyo responded that Eurus and Ninya were going. She was worried that it seemed like the recent poor fishing was because of trouble with Gyoshin, and Fuka agreed. Frankly, at this rate, Gyoshin doesn't have much time left, but if they can repel the Sea King, there's still hope. Nianyo prayed that they will be of some help to them, and asked Fuka to ensure that nothing happens to Ninya. He promised he'll make sure nothing happens to her little sister, making Nianyo relieved. If those words came from Fuka, the greatest of the fishman warriors, then she can trust them. Fuka turned away and told her not to flatter him. Once they got to the shore, they saw a small boat there, and the old man who brought it wondered if that really was going to be enough. If they'd like, he can get them a bigger and sturdier one. It's just for 2 passengers, so Eurus thought it was already plenty, and a bigger boat would just draw attention. And since he'll be putting up a magic shield, it didn't matter if the hull was a bit flimsy. Well, if he says so. Eurus pointed to the boat's motor and asked what that thing was. The old man questioned, almost mocking, if this was his first time on a boat, and explained that it was a magic-powered outboard motor. If he puts a magic stone in it, it will spin round and round, pushing the boat forward. It's convenient that it runs on magic. Fuka held the rope attached to the boat's front and asked to confirm if all he needed was to pull this along to guide it. That's right, they'll be counting on him. Ninya stepped on the boat, but when she saw Shishu, she questioned why he was on board. Eurus told Shishu he can wait back in town, but he just stared at him, not moving an inch. Seeing that he won't leave, Eurus thought that was probably for the best and advised him not to overdo it, and with that, they set sail. Eurus enveloped the boat with a magic shield as Fuka pulled it down underwater. Nyanya waved at them, thinking that the hero who saved Nyanir, Eurus, might just be the catalyst they needed for that plan. They traversed the ocean with Fuka's guide, and it seemed like the shield was holding up without any issues, so they're good to go. Ninya wondered if it really was safe and if it's not going to get crushed to a pulp, so Eurus assured her not to worry. Besides, he's already cast water breathing on her, so even if the worst happens, she won't drown. Well, she'd rather there not be a worst case. Fuka informs them that they're about to enter the area where the Sea King's minions roam, and they'll try to proceed without being seen, so they should keep the noise down. Eurus looked around. The deeper they go, the more the light starts to fade. The inside of the ocean really was fascinating. He's so annoyingly carefree. Ninya clasped her hands and just hoped that they would make it to the undersea castle safely. Well, it looks like that won't be happening. The gods really said not today, child. Eurus asked Fuka about the situation, and it seems the Sea King's minions have spotted them. Eurus looked around, but he couldn't see because of how dark it was. Just then, Fuka shouted to speed up the boat when something suddenly bumped into their magic shield. Ninya panicked after seeing what seemed to be a giant fish, and berated Fuka for not talking about dangerous things that were prowling around. Fuka informed them that it was coming again, and Eurus told him he'll handle it, so he should just keep going. He put a spell on the boat's motor before swimming out of the magic shield. The spell Eurus placed on the motor was accelerating magic, causing the boat to speed out of there. Shishu called out to Eurus, and Eurus assured him that he'll catch up later, so she should take care of Ninya while he's not around. Eurus was left alone in the darkness, where he can barely see a thing. He looked around and noticed a vibration behind him. When he turned around, he saw a giant fish with its mouth open, ready to swallow him. Meanwhile, Fuka looked around after getting away. It looks like they managed to lose them. Ninya worriedly looked back in Eurus's direction as he jumped out there all by himself, and wondered if he was going to be okay. Shishu assured her that Eurus will be fine since he's super strong. She was about to question why he's able to talk when Fuka announced their arrival to the undersea castle. Fuka anchored the boat and told the two to wait there so he could go look for Eurus, but to his surprise, Eurus was already back, without even sweating. Thank goodness he's safe. When he rushed out on his own, Ninya thought it was over. Fuka asked how he got away from that giant fish, but he didn't run away, and actually beat it. It caught Eurus off guard and was able to swallow him, but he used ice magic inside its stomach and tore it apart. Ninya thought that was insane. Well, thanks to that, Eurus got a feel for underwater combat. He began walking away when Fuka suddenly called out to him. He had underestimated Eurus, who chose to stay behind for his comrades, and thought he was a true warrior and deserved respect. Eurus thanked him, though it wasn't a big deal. Ninya suddenly came up to him, questioning him about Shishu, who didn't seem to be a normal dog because she heard him speak. Shishu apologized, but Eurus just patted him and stutteringly explained to Ninya that there were complicated reasons for that. It was a long story. Fuka cut him off, told them to quit their yammering, and asked what the problem was. Ninya explained that she heard Shishu talk, but Fuka just thought he was a beastkin. The two turned confused, and Eurus immediately agreed, claiming that Shishu was a rare dog-type beastkin. Since he's rare, he pretends to be just a regular dog to avoid attention. Ninya smelled BS because she's never heard of a dog beastkin. Well, that's because they're rare. Enough of that. Gyoshin was waiting, so Fuka urged them to keep moving. They entered the castle, with goofy-looking fish guards following behind them. Eurus thanked Fuka for saving him, and Fuka, who seemed clueless about what he's talking about, just responded affirmatively. Now that he thought about it, why did Fuka cover for him? He just brushed it off and followed Fuka inside. Eurus whispered to Ninya to ask what Gyoshin was like, but she didn't have an answer either because it was also her first time meeting them. She thought Gyoshin would be like a big boss fish or something, making Eurus become more nervous as he imagined Gyoshin scolding him for wanting to eat their kin and preparing him for the slaughter. Fuka kneeled down and informed Gyoshin regarding the completion of his mission. A woman's voice responded, praising him for doing well. The curtain surrounding the bed slowly opened as it revealed a gigantic woman. The two exclaimed in surprise at how huge she was, and Fuka reminded them to show some respect, but their mouths remained open. Gyoshin welcomed them and introduced herself. She is the master of this undersea castle, and asked to be called affectionately. Ninya greeted her and introduced herself and Eurus. Gyoshin thanked them for answering their sudden summons, and then glanced at Shishu, who also introduced himself. Eurus quickly covered his mouth and tried to explain, but Gyoshin just smiled and thanked Shishu. Then, Fuka apologized for only bringing 3 people, because it seems like the people of the land can't even breathe underwater. Without Eurus and his magic, no one could have made it there. However, it seems unlikely that just their support alone will be enough to stand against the Sea King, so he consulted Gyoshin on what to do. She told him it was fine. In the first place, they did not seek help from the land dwellers for their combat strength in underwater battles. First, she explained the situation they were in. This undersea castle is currently under attack by one who calls themselves the Sea King. She had maintained a protective barrier around the castle and continued to defend it. But after a month of war, her strength is reaching its limit. They were shocked to hear that she's been maintaining such a massive magic barrier for an entire month. But it's not just a barrier. She had also been creating air inside the castle since 2 months ago. Ninya asked if that really was a big deal, and Eurus answered yes. Maintaining magic constantly consumes mana, and an average person would collapse in less than an hour just trying to keep up a personalized barrier. That basically means time is of the essence. Gyoshin was glad that they understood. Eurus gets the situation now, and asks if all they needed to do was to beat the Sea King. Gyoshin disagreed. That is not what they wished to ask of them then. She called someone named Serena. And a young child peeked from behind her. At the same time, outside the barrier, the Sea King, Leviathan, suspected that Gyoshin was up to something. However, adding a few humans won't change the situation. Their barrier is already at its limit, and he'll launch an all-out attack and wipe out the fish folk along with the undersea castle. Back inside the castle, Ninya asked who that girl was. Her name is Serena, and what Gyoshin would like to ask of them is to safely escort her back to her home on land. 2 months ago, soldiers found Serena collapsed near the river mouth and brought her to the castle for protection. But she is of the river people, so she cannot survive in the sea. Eurus was confused as to why she can't live in the sea when she's a fish person. What does that even mean? Simply put, Serena is a freshwater fish. That's why she created air in the castle. They intended to return Serena to the land once she recovered from her weakened state, but unfortunately, that was when the Sea King's invasion began. Now, they lost the means to get her out safely. So, all they needed to do was to get Serena out of there and escort her back to her homeland. Then, what about the Sea King? Gyoshin intends to personally defeat that one, Fuka protested, claiming that she's in no condition to even stand, so they'll gladly lay down their lives to stop the Sea King. Even so, she's the guardian of the sea, and it is her duty to protect all of them. She tried to move, however. She had to clutch her head that suddenly throbbed painfully. Serena apologized, thinking it was all her fault, but Gyoshin assured her that it was her decision to bring her there. Therefore, it is only natural that she takes full responsibility. Ninya turned to Eurus and asked if he could do something. He had no problem fighting the Sea King and would somehow make it work, but he didn't want to trample on Gyoshin's strong resolve either. As he wondered about what to do, Shishu suggested giving the potion he gave everyone back in Nionir to Gyoshin, then maybe she'll get her strength back. However, they used up all the high potions during that monster disaster, and they take several days to make. In that case, Shishu suggested making food, then turned to Gyoshin to tell her to try his master's cooking. If she eats Eurus's food, she'll feel super energized. It's actually thanks to his food that Shishu could speak again and helped him defeat the griffin. Eurus turned to Fuka and asked to borrow the undersea castle's kitchen. However, before Fuka could even respond, the whole castle began to shake. Leviathan was shooting out countless breath attacks as he laughed about Gyoshin's magic barrier weakening. They'll charge in all at once and devour both Gyoshin and the fish folk. All the fisherman warriors went outside, holding their weapons to fight against the Sea King's minions. They had to buy time until Gyoshin recovers and must protect the undersea castle no matter what the cost. Fuka really hopes that Eurus can pull this off. Eurus, along with Ninya and Shishu, was led to the undersea castle's kitchen and was greeted by the head chef, an anglerfish-type fish folk. She looked more like the Lord Gyoshin he imagined. The head chef asked if he was the one who's going to cook for Gyoshin all by himself, and questioned whether he can handle it. After all, none of their equipment can be operated by a single person. She's right. The pan was ridiculously huge. And even with all this, they had to cook in several batches since Gyoshin eats a lot. Eurus will have to use several types of magic simultaneously. He crouched down and noticed a fire on the stove. He was surprised to learn that they used fire since the place was usually underwater. She pointed to a magic device on the ceiling. One would get pretty bored eating nothing but raw fish, so they use Magitech to generate air in the kitchen and dining hall. That was another surprise for Eurus. Wasn't it a problem to eat their own kind? The head chef looked dumbfounded and suddenly burst into laughter. She patted Eurus's back, claiming that he said the funniest things. Don't land dwellers eat cows and pigs? It was exactly the same for them. Ninya was still not quite sure why Eurus was the one doing the cooking. Apparently, the food he makes grants buffs. In other words, it restores stamina and mana, boosts attack power, and so on. Ninya suggested just using healing magic if he can heal people, making Eurus scratch the back of his head. Well, the only healing magic he knows is a basic spell for treating minor wounds, but the buffs from his cooking seem to be an unconscious effect. Ninya was beginning to distrust him more and more after hearing his vague answer, but Shishu claimed that it was true, and that's how he learned how to talk. In any case, the Sea King's assault has already started, so he'll also start cooking now. The Fishman warriors continued to fight outside the barrier with Fuka's lead. He commanded them to establish a thorough defense line and to not chase after any who retreated. Their one and only objective is to defend the undersea castle. If Gyoshin recovers, they can easily turn the tables. Until then, they just have to hold out and do whatever it takes. Back in the kitchen, Ninya asked what Eurus was using for ingredients, since a human-sized portion won't be nearly enough. The head chef informed them that they've got some seafood stockpiled, though it's been hard to resupply since the Sea King started his attack. However, Eurus won't be using seafood because he's never cooked fish before, so he wouldn't know where to start. That's why he's using what he had on him. He always carried a massive amount of ingredients, so he never had to worry about food. Ninya asked where it was, and Eurus replied for her to just watch. He'll need fire magic, wind magic, water magic, and physical magic. Alright, he can do this. He opened his bag and shook it to release his stock of food inside. He cut the vegetables and meat into manageable pieces, ignited the Magitech, adjusted the heat, and added a generous amount of oil. Ninya asked what he was making. It was obviously a stir-fry. Wow, that's it? How underwhelming. Eurus apologized, but what did she expect? They didn't have any more time. The cooking might be rushed, but the effect will be the same. Outside, Leviathan laughed. Just as he expected, Gyoshin refuses to show herself. She must be growing weak from maintaining that magic barrier. In that case, he'll enjoy tormenting her to death. Nice and slow. He looked forward to the moment he could tear her head from her shoulders. Back in the kitchen, Eurus seasoned the stir-fry with salt and pepper, and added a dash of his secret seasoning. While cooking, his hair began to turn completely white, so Ninya asked if he was okay. He was. It just happens when he uses magic. It was nothing to worry about, so she didn't need to mind him. Shishu watched him quietly, remembering the dungeon master. They're not only lookalikes now, they're identical. Once Eurus finished cooking, he asked them to get a plate ready so he could serve it up. In Gyoshin's chambers, a few fish folk served the giant plate of stir-fry. Eurus apologized for the wait, but his special supersized stir-fry was now ready. Gyoshin was happy since it's been a while since she last had a dish from the surface. However, Eurus urged her to quickly eat because they had no more time. So, Gyoshin picked up the plate and chopsticks. That was supposed to be a huge serving, but it looked like a tiny saucer in her hands. It really drives home just how massive Gyoshin is. Gyoshin began eating the stir-fry Eurus made, and after taking a few bites, she exclaimed about how utterly remarkable it was. She could feel the power surging through her, and finished the food in only 2 bites. Ninya berated Eurus for not making more, but Gyoshin assured them that it was more than enough. She was now able to stand back up, and the fish folks cheered in relief. Gyoshin thanked Eurus for his cooking that brought back her power. With this, she'll be able to beat the Sea King. Outside, Fuka looked back at the undersea castle, wondering how much longer Eurus was going to take, when the barrier suddenly disappeared. Fuka panicked, while Leviathan laughed loudly. It seems Gyoshin finally exhausted her strength. How anticlimactic. Now, once he destroys the undersea castle, he'll feast upon her corpse. He continued to laugh menacingly, when he suddenly heard a voice silencing him. It was Gyoshin, with Eurus standing on her shoulder. She turned to the shocked Leviathan, and threatened him that his arrogant tyranny ends now. Gyoshin swam past Fuka, who Eurus told to stand down as they would be taking it from here. Fuka raised his trident and cheered them on. Gyoshin activated her mermaid mode and legs turned into a mermaid's tail. Eurus decided to handle the small fry, so she can head straight for the Sea King. Once Gyoshin agreed, he jumped off from her shoulder. A bunch of sea creatures immediately charged towards him, but he already figured out how to deal with them. They're in his element now, and there's nowhere to run. He used light magic, letting out a beam of light and ice magic to freeze those creatures. Meanwhile, Leviathan shouted Gyoshin's name angrily and got punched by her. He cursed at her, questioning what she was doing. She didn't release her punch, planning to push him far away. They'll now settle this one-on-one in a place more fitting for their battle. The chapter ends at 14. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you love this manga. Have a good day.